my friends, a couple of weeks ago I shared this little Franken bag I made on social media. I wanted something smaller, so I merged my Ray dual zip crossbody bag, took some elements of our Dana pack and crystal, and created this little cutie. Introducing the Rayna Sling. So when I had created this bag for myself, it was important to me that I could wear it tight across my chest like this, but also easily and quickly shove it to my back in case I needed to pick up my youngest kiddo and hold him. But also, I really wanted it to be able to cinch tight enough and wear it low across my waist if I wanted to as well. For today's video, I did make this one in all vinyl, and I used a nylon type material for the inside. And I'm sewing on the Sailrite Ultrafeed LS. It is a portable walking foot machine and it's very strong. And I would not recommend you using vinyl for your entire exterior like I did unless you are on an industrial or a machine like this, because you can get bulk right here across the seam where the side wings get attached, and it can be pretty tricky to sew those layers if you're sewing on a domestic machine. My written instructions are all for quilt cotton, so it is doable in all quilt cotton. These D-ring connectors are vinyl, cork, or leather, but I will show you how to do a version in quilt cotton as well. It is a pretty easy mod if you truly want to avoid all of the vinyl pieces that as of right now are needed. I am listing this as an intermediate pattern, mainly because we are sewing a gusset. Proper seam allowance is very important, and it is finished with binding. But the technique we use for here is the same technique we used in the Ray dual zip crossbody video, and it makes it really easy in my opinion. Again, if you are sewing on a domestic machine, those binding strips that you're cutting, you want to make sure it's just straight quilt cotton. The lighter weight, the better to reduce bulk. Finished dimension is roughly about 8 inches across, about 6 inches tall. It does have this front zippered pocket that goes the full height and length of this panel here. Inside is a mesh pocket along that front wall where you have a lip balm holder over here and then a generous sized pocket for your smaller items as well. Hopefully you've picked out your supplies already, so let's get to sewing. For this pattern, I did poll social media and asked you if you wanted the fancy strap or just a normal strap, and overwhelmingly you guys asked for the fancy strap. So because of that, we will be sewing with vinyl, cork, or leather for this portion, as well as the D-ring connectors. But if you are not comfortable with sewing with vinyl, cork, or leather, or don't want to, and you would just prefer to do a simple strap, you know, maybe you buy a pre-made strap, or you want to just make your own. This one doesn't have any vinyl accents. It's just got the tri-glide and 2 swivel clasps in 1.5 inches. So that is an option. And then later on in the process, I will show you how to do a fabric version of the D-ring connectors as well. This is the little cutie I made in the written portion of the instruction. It is all quilt cotton on the exterior, and then like a nylon, almost kind of a ripstop on the interior. But we did use a vinyl for the D-ring connector. So in order to add these D-ring connectors, some must-have tools would be a hole punch, so either a rotary punch or a standalone punch to punch the holes. You will need some sort of setting tool to set the rivets, and that's either a press or they have manual tools where you can get it in the kit and you can set your rivets manually with that. And then if you have a standalone punch, you would need some sort of mallet. Now, some honorable mentions that you don't necessarily need, but are incredibly helpful with this, is a stapler, a staple remover, and then a stiletto tool when we go to add the binding later. And of course, my VIP tool in my studio is a hairdryer, because I'm going to do my tutorial today using vinyl. And anytime I'm going to turn vinyl, I like to blast it with heat first because it makes it real soft, easy to turn, and I'm not fighting against it. Lastly, I will be painting the edges of the D-ring connectors, so I did pull out some base coat and color to match the vinyl I'm using, as well as an applicator tool, and then just something to protect my work surface. This is optional. If you don't have any issues with your D-ring connector being raw, it blends in and it looks nice, you can skip this step. But for the sake of time and for this tutorial, I am not going to get into edge painting. I do have another video already on YouTube. I'll link it in the description box below if you want to learn more about edge painting in a more in-depth process. Something also that's really important that I want to bring up before we jump into making the bag is this is a gusseted bag, meaning this is one loop, a continuous piece, and the size of your zipper makes a difference when it comes to a gusseted bag. I've called for a standard number 5 zipper, which is typically 1 1/4 inches wide, the tape is. But with these new fancier zipper tapes, I want to draw your attention how different in size all 3 of these are. So this is a standard and it measures correctly. So if you look on here, it is exactly 1 1/4 inches wide. This is the type of zipper you want to grab from your stash. This one is extra wide. It is 1 and almost 3/8 inch wide. Do you see how it goes past the 1/4 inch? That's going to affect your gusset and your measurements, and you're going to wonder why things aren't fitting right or you're trimming a ton. This one is actually short. This is only like 1 1/8 inch. Doesn't quite go to the 1/4 inch mark. Again, your gusset's going to be messed up. You're going to end up too narrow to meet the bottom portion, the zipper panel. So keep that in mind when you are choosing your zippers, that the width matters. So for me, it was important that people were able to wear it across their body, or if they preferred, to be able to cinch it tight enough to wear it loosely around their hips. I realize most people will choose one way or another, but I didn't want you to have to make a separate strap in order to switch it if you chose. So, being that there's a fancy accent on the end, it's not so simple to just cut it off and shorten it if it is too long of a strap for your customer or yourself. In order to shorten the strap, that would be actually pretty simple if you just cut off the portion that goes under the strap adjuster here, and you pull the length that you no longer need, then you re-wrap the strap end, rivet it or sew it, and now you have the strap that fits. But the key to having a perfect strap that fits this way and this way is your hip measurement. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab a tape measure and you're going to measure the widest part of your hips. So I'm going to take this around your butt and your hips and you're going to take that measurement. So for me, it's 37 inches. I'm going to cut the second portion of the webbing, the long piece, 37 inches. That will allow it to fit crossbody and cinch tight enough to go around my waist. So starting along the top, we have the materials and supplies to make our fancy straps. So we have one longer piece of webbing cut, a shorter piece, and then we've got 2 strap accents, a strap end, a rectangle ring, a tri-glide, 2 swivel clasps, 2 D-rings. Then moving down here, we have an exterior zipper panel, 2 of those, and then an interior liner zipper panel, 2 of those. These are our rectangle cuts for our D-rings. If you are using the SVG files, you don't have to cut the rectangle cuts, but I find gluing them wrong sides together and then cutting it down to shape gives us the best even edges. But if you're using the SVG files, you can skip this rectangle step and just glue them wrong sides. I have side wings, 4 of them. 2 of them are each cut mirrored, so they should be facing each other and you should have a left and a right side wing. We have the front top exterior in a liner, a front bottom exterior in a liner, a zipper and a pull. These are the back main body. This is for the exterior, and then we have 3 interior liner pieces. We have a main zipper here. We have a bottom gusset, exterior and liner. These are our binding strips, so I've already cut 2 of those to bind each edge on the interior of the bag at the end. We have a cut of mesh, some fold over elastic, and then I'm just going to use a couple of labels because I am overrunneth. This I'm going to add to the back of my bag, and this I thought would be cute underneath our fold over elastic on that mesh pocket. Since the D-ring connectors do need to be glued and I'm going to edge paint them, I need to allow adequate time to dry in between layers. So I'm going to do that first thing so that as I'm making my bag, it will have the chance to dry. This vinyl that I'm using has this like fleshy suede-like backing, which is my absolute favorite vinyl to work with because it glues really well with this water-based leather adhesive. If you have one that has a fabric backing, you're not going to be able to glue it well with this at all. You'll need some sort of other glue that is designed for fabric for it to secure. Otherwise, you can use double-sided tape. Just be mindful that you kind of want to get close to the edges so that they seal well and there's not a big old gap. Then you're going to end up sewing through that double-sided tape. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to set my template off to the side for now, and then I'm going to add some of this adhesive towards on the back. I'm going to grab two and lay them wrong sides together, lining up that edge. And I will typically kind of put this under something heavy so the glue can have a chance to dry and secure all the edges. And then I'm going to come back to these pieces after that glue has had a chance to dry, and I will cut it to shape. Once you've given your D-ring tabs a chance to dry with the glue, then you're going to take the template and cut it, trace around it, and cut it down to size. So now we have our D-ring connectors that are double-sided, and that's a nice thickness for these. If you're using something like veg tan where it's already thick and nice, you could just use something like this, single-sided. You would not have to glue two pieces of leather together. But because this was on the thinner side, I do want that durability of a double layer. Now we're going to go ahead and sew around the edge an 1/8 inch, and then I'm going to add some edge paint and we'll move along to our strap. This next portion, I'm going to speed up the sewing portion because I'm going to do both at once, but I want to tell you that we're going to leave our thread tails long and knot them on the underside of our D-ring tab so that it will look like a nice continuous stitch. There's not going to be any harsh back stitching lines anywhere on our connector. Here we go. We pulled the thread tails to the back and there's my knot. I knotted them off. And as you can see, this vinyl is really pretty. It's dyed throughout, or the back matches the front. So technically it doesn't even look like it would need any edge coat, but it is something that I enjoy doing and prefer. So I'm going to add the edge coat off camera and let's move on. Since I'm not doing the fabric D-ring connectors for my bag, I'm just going to show you with one set. So if you are doing this method, you will need to cut 4 rectangle pieces, a little bit wider than the D-ring template. So I took the D-ring template and cut out a piece of Decaville Light and I fused it to the backside of my quilting cotton, nylon, whatever. And you just want to make sure that you have an overhang on all sides for a seam allowance. So then you're going to take these and lay them right sides together. And you're going to stitch just along the Decaville Light all the way around, and you're going to leave this long edge unsewn so we can turn it right side out. Switch to black thread so hopefully you can see that I literally just rode the edge of the Decaville Light for my stitching. So now I'm going to go ahead and just trim my seam allowances except for this long edge where we're turning. So I'm just going to trim them down using some pinking shears. Turn it right side out through this hole and press well. Just turned it right side out just like this, and this is our turning hole. So now we're going to just fold that edge right over the Decaville Light again and line up this side. So this portion that doesn't have the Decaville Light will be the interior portion that gets folded over. So it's going to be more important that we make sure that this edge is folded over the Decaville Light perfectly. And then clip this edge with the seams tucked, and then top stitch like we do the vinyl version. An 1/8 inch from the edge, we'll punch our holes based on the template. Here you go. Repeat with your second connector and you will have a fabric version. So if you know me, you know I personally love to get the strap done first before we tackle the bag, because by the time you're done making the bag, you're just ready to be done, and to know you have to make your strap in order to finish, it's really annoying. So in front of me, I have the stuff to make our fancy strap. These are the 2 strap accents here. I'm showing you 2 different methods on how you can get them to secure to your webbing. I did add a little strip of Decaville Light cut narrower than this 1-inch channel to add some durability, because this is a stress point. It is a pretty nice faux leather as is. It has no stretch, but if yours has a lot of stretch or it's a really flimsy vinyl, you will definitely want to add this reinforcement strip. So this one I already added double-sided tape along the edges here, because it's going to be really important that those edges seal together around our webbing and that we sew close to that edge. So if you do this method, you will end up sewing through the double-sided tape. That is why I did it only on the one side here and one side here, so it's not 2 layers of tape. But in between your strap accents, I would clean your needle with an alcohol wipe because it can gum up your needle. So I'll do that on this one, but for this one, I'm going to use my Eco Weld adhesive and spread it all over this to show you how well this stuff glues. So you have to thread on your swivel clasp. So the bar is up towards the center here. We'll do this one first since it's tape. Like I said, I'm just going to show you, this is the two different ways to do this. So I'm going to add the Eco Well to the back side of this one. And I'm going to let it just kind of sit a moment so it can get tacky, and then it sticks really well. So while it is kind of drying a bit to get tacky, I'm going to prep our little piece of webbing cut. I'm going to loop it through the rectangle ring and line up the edges. This is a woven webbing, so it can be a little bit thicker, so you can make a judgment call whether you want to line these up perfectly and stitch them or stagger them a smidge so that you reduce the bulk all in one spot. So I'm just going to stagger mine just like this. I'll stitch right here and then we can add it. And now I'm going to lay it centered on the strap accent. So you should have gaps on each side, and you're going to fold this over and line up those edges. Press it into the webbing, and then I'm going to really focus on pinching these sides, and I'll grab some clips to try and hold that so that they can dry pinched, because that is important. One, when we go to stitch it, we don't want to see webbing. When we sew the sides, we really don't want to be able to see inside at all. It makes for a huge eyesore. So I'm going to grab some clips and pinch this so that the sides can stay secure. While I have this one clipped to try and secure those edges, I'm going to go ahead and add our strap end here. Again, since this is a pretty thick woven webbing, I don't want to do a double fold to secure the end, because that's sewing through very thick layers. So I do like to just take a piece of the vinyl, wrap it around the end like this, sew across this edge, and then I will rivet it when it comes to adding it to the tri-glide. Off camera, I did add that row of stitching here, so now I'm going to grab the tri-glide or strap adjuster. You're going to come up one side and go over that center bar and tuck through the other side. Give yourself enough wiggle room that you can either attach by sewing along this bottom edge, or you're going to punch 2 holes and insert rivets. Actually, this is pretty thick for a rotary punch, so whenever I punch holes in webbing, I do prefer the standalone punch. It is much stronger, so I grab my standalone punch, hold it tight, and our rivets here. I've had people ask me, aren't you worried about the webbing unraveling over time? You could add fray check there or singe it with a lighter if you prefer. But I find that when I'm crimping my double cap rivets on the back side, it really does secure that webbing underneath that really well. And I don't have any issues with it fraying. Here you go. Now with the strap end face up and your strap straight, you don't want it to get looped or twisted around in any way. Find the end here, and you're going to take this piece and loop it through the rectangle ring back on itself, just like this, and come back up through this side of the tri-glide or strap adjuster, over the center bar, and out the other side. So now you should have this. So you have a swivel clasp on this end, your strap adjuster, and then that's where this second piece is going to go. So this is the one with the double-sided tape on it. I'm going to center it on this strap accent here, again leaving at least those gaps on the side so that I can fold it over and line up the edges perfectly and pinch into the tape. If your webbing is too thick and you can't pinch these sides together, I would encourage you to choose a different webbing. It will make all the difference in the end how nice your strap looks. So now that this is all prepped and ready to go, we're going to go ahead and sew the perimeter. Before I start stitching, I did swap out to a zipper foot because I want nothing on this side so that when I come up to my swivel clasp, I can get as close as possible without hitting it. So I swapped that out already. I did decrease my stitch length over here so that when I come to the corner, I can adjust it just so to hit the corners exactly where I want. So if you're used to sewing with a really long stitch length, I would encourage you not to do that on something like this, because when you do try to shorten it because you're going to come off the edge, you'll notice that really tiny stitch compared to all the rest of them. So I typically like to start along this top edge. And the key to a nice looking strap is getting as close to the edge, but making sure you're catching all layers. So that's the trick. As you have more practice with this and you've made a few, you can know how far close to the edge you can get. You can see I've already lined up these edges, and I took my time to make sure they were all lined up. I'll hold my thread tails, and I'm going to leave them long so that I can pull them to the back side and knot them off. So I'm going to hand crank so I can get close to the corner. Make sure your needle is on the upswing before you lift and pivot, so you complete that stitch and you don't get that skipped stitch in the corner. And then I'm coming off the webbing to catch this little channel. Make sure I'm on the upswing to pivot and hold. Upswing, pivot. This is what I'm talking about. I might pull a little bit back so I don't accidentally fall off the edge, and then drop it in the corner and turn. Just going to give that a tug to pull it to the back side first. And then you want to end right back in one of your previous stitches. I'm just going to lift up so I can get a better look. Did I hit it? And then pull it out. That's how it should look. Go ahead and give that back piece a gentle tug to pull your threads to the back side. Now you knot those off and it looks like a continuous stitch. Isn't she pretty? This one was my thicker side, but remember, as long as we have that side sealed, you cannot see the webbing. It looks so much better. And because of this vinyl matching the front side, the back side matching the front side, I think it looks just fine without edge painting it, so I'm not going to bother. But I do really like the look of added rivets, so I'm just going to add a couple of rivets to each of these strap accents. And I just kind of eyeball where I want them to be. And try to keep them symmetrical. For this project, I do, if you want to use rivets, or you have to use it on the D-ring connectors, but for these that are optional, I do encourage you to keep different sized double cap rivets on hand, because depending on your material, a small or a 6mm post might be just enough, or it might be not enough where you can hear the snap, and because the post is too short, and you'll need a bigger rivet. So keep an assortment on hand so that you have what you need. Voila, she's so pretty. Now that this is done, let's go work on our bag. Moving right along, we're going to work on our interior mesh pocket. So I do have my cut of mesh and my fold over elastic, and you can see that line that runs along the center where your fold line. You're just going to straddle the top edge of your mesh and clip it in place. I just have that top edge kind of butted up to that fold line. And I'm just going to choose a spot where I'm going to put this. I'm just going to stick it right there. Now in the instructions, I write for a little lip balm pocket, so it's a smaller pocket along the edge and a larger pocket. If you don't have a need for a lip balm pocket and you want to just divide it perfectly up the center, that's entirely up to you. But now I'm going to sew along this top edge to secure the fold over elastic over our mesh. You may want to increase your stitch length on this part because this will need to stretch. Not a whole lot. I mean, I find bound bags that interior pockets tend to kind of bow out anyway. So either use a slight zigzag stitch along this top or just increase your stitch length. Now take the mesh pocket and lie it along the bottom long edge of one of the main body liners. I'm going to clip along that side and this side of the elastic. I am going to do the lip balm holder, so I'm going to just measure 2 inches over and then sew up, do a stitch or two across the top, pivot down, and finish basting it along the edge, attaching the mesh pocket to the liner. This is my clip designating that 2-inch mark. In my past videos, I've mentioned how this is a stress point on a pocket going in and out, so I don't want my back stitching along the top edge. I prefer it along the bottom. So that's why I typically will do a continuous stitch so that this isn't back stitched up top. Now just trim down the bottom corners to match the curve of the liner. Set that aside and grab your side wings. You should have 4 cut mirrored, so these are mirrored and these are mirrored. So you'd have a right and a left, and you're going to lay them right sides together and clip along the edge. Now we want to sew a 3/8 inch seam allowance just along these 3 sides. We'll leave the long straight edge unsewn so we can turn it right side out. Now go ahead and trim your seam allowance down. I've got some pinking shears here. If you don't have pinking shears, just kind of cut little notches on this curved portion. Cut off the corners on each side. Just like that. This is one of those times where I'm going to want to blast this with heat to turn it because of it being a thicker vinyl. I don't want it to fight me. And then I'm going to hammer the seams real flat before we top stitch. But I'm going to go hit it with some heat. They're now turned right side out. It did take my mallet and hammer the seams a bit so they lay flatter. Now top stitch around the edge. I like to do an 1/8 inch from the edge followed by another 1/4 inch from that. Just do the one row of stitching here just to close that side, and then we'll trim off the little tails along the bottom. Go ahead and trim up any of this uneven portion along the bottom, the little tails. Then fold point to point and mark the centers along this straight edge. Just cut a little notch so you can see where the center is. Repeat with the other one. There we go. Now we're just going to set these aside and work on our front zipper pocket. For this section, you have your front bottom exterior and liner, the front top exterior and liner, the shorter zipper, and one of the liner pieces. I'm going to leave the zipper pull off for now because I find installing the zipper much easier without working around the zipper pull. We're going to start with the bottom portion, so I'm just going to set these tops off to the side. I did go ahead and add the 1/8 inch double-sided tape along the straight edge along the top here. I'm a real big fan of using 1/8 inch double-sided tape for zipper installs instead of basting the zipper in place because it just really works great at holding the zipper where it needs to be and keeps all the layers from shifting. So I'm just lining up the top edge with the zipper face down on the bottom portion of the front exterior, and I'm going to sandwich it with the lining. Get that started. Lay it directly on top, aligning all of those edges and layers, just like this. So for our zipper installs, we are going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So attach these together, flip it right side out, and top stitch. I did go ahead and swap out to a zipper foot for this install. Okay, press the liner away from the zipper, finger press it well. Since I'm not going to be using an iron for these materials, I'm just focusing on doing a good finger press. I do like to line up the bottom edges so that I don't forget about the liner and let it pop up and I accidentally sew it rolled and it's much shorter. So depending on your materials, that quilt cotton does press very nicely with an iron, so if that is what you're using, I encourage you to press this. Otherwise, go ahead and line up those layers along the bottom and clip them. It will be important that they are all at the same depth here. Okay. Now we want to repeat with this top edge, so I'll take the double-sided tape off, the backing off the top here. I'm going to lay it right sides facing down on top of the zipper, lining up these edges so it's centered. I'll flip it over and repeat with the liner portion. lay it right side face down, lining up those edges. And sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like with the front and bottom portion, go ahead and finger press that well. And the rolling part happens especially easy on this back portion. See, it always just wants to be so much shorter, so I really give it a tug to line up these edges because it is important that they all are aligned. You don't want to catch it in your top stitch rolled. I know this might seem excessive, but I can't emphasize it enough. Ask me how I know this. It rolls. It rolls a lot. Right. Perfect. Add my zipper pull. I like my zipper pulls opening left to right, so I'm feeding it on from the right side. Then I'm just going to pull it to about the middle and trim up the zipper and the sides so they're nice and flush. Now I'll take a lighter and just kind of run it across the edges of the teeth here so we can singe that and it doesn't fray. Now once this part is complete, you've got a liner on the back and this is the exterior. You're going to take one of your liner pieces and lay it face up in front of you and lay this on top. I line up the bottom edges and the sides and I want to make sure it is the same height. If it is taller than our liner, we will trim from the top. So flip it over and double check to see if it's the same height. So it is, it's pretty even, so we'll go ahead and leave that. But again, if your zipper tape is any different than the 1 1/4 inch, or you took maybe a bigger seam allowance or a wider seam allowance, that can affect the height of this panel. We want to make sure it is exactly the same as the liner as it should be. I mentioned earlier I was going to add this cute little label to the back side. I'm probably going to do it right up on the lower portion of the back. I'm going at least 1 inch up. And I want to do that before I do any sandwiching of liner pieces to this piece. I'll get my ruler out and double check it is on center, but just about there. And if you wanted to add a maker's mark on this portion, I do have my metal label. I think I will add to the bottom right corner. I do like the look of that. Again, I'm going at least 1 inch in and at least 1 inch up, and I want to make sure I'm not going through any of the liners. So this is before we're going to clip it to that lining portion. We're going to install it just to the exterior portion before moving on to the liners. Now that we've added any labels we want to add, I still have this sitting liners right sides facing each other. Now we're going to layer it on top of the one with the mesh pocket. And I put the mesh pocket on the back of the front wall because when you're wearing it, you can see the pocket and access the pocket a lot easier against your body. If you do prefer this on this one, then just swap it, but be mindful that this adds a little bit of bulk. The gusset seam ends up right here, and then you've got the side wings we're going to be adding. So there's going to be an area along here that is thicker than the rest of it, and this would add to that. So just keep that in mind if you are sewing on a domestic machine. So now I'm going to flip this to the wrong side, so the wrong side is face up, and I'm going to take these layers and lay it on top and align all the edges. Clip them as one. Just going to do that, those 4 center points to start, and then move it and double check things. So you can see this is already shimmied. out of place. Just like that, looks good. Now we can finish clipping the rest. So that is one side, just like this. And then this is the back main and then a liner piece. And we're gonna lay this directly on top and clip. So for both pieces, you should be able to flip it to the wrong side and see the pretty side of the liner. But before we base these, all the layers in place, we want to grab our little side wings that we created in a previous step, and we're going to line up these center markings along the sarna markings on these pieces here and clip that. Going through all layers here that we'll be basting. We're just going to do this once, so that's why I haven't had you baste the liners on yet, because we're going to do it together. Flip it over and double check it's not bubbling. See, I moved that with my clip. All the edges are aligned on this one. We got our wings, and then all of the edges are aligned on this one. Now, take it to your sewing machine and baste an 1/8 inch from the edge to secure all layers together on both pieces. Went around the edge and basted the layers in place. So again, make sure that's on the right side, that this pocket is on the bottom side versus flipping it around. So make sure that's correct. And then also want to draw your attention to these corners here. You don't want them to come shallow where they don't meet the edge. If anything, you want a little bit of an overhang. So when we attach our gusset, we will ensure that we catch these corners. We don't want them pulling out or showing, the corner showing in the sides when the bag is turned right side out. So now we can set these off to the side as we prepare our top zipper panels. So I've got the longer zipper, the 2 exterior zipper panels, and 2 liner. We're going to work with just the one side at a time. So I'm going to set 2 of these off to the side. Did add my 1/8 inch double-sided tape along both long edges here. The pull is off for this step as well. So I'm going to take off the backing here and lay our zipper face down, centered on this panel, aligning those top edges. Then you're going to take a liner, take that backing off as well, and sandwich the zipper so right side's facing. Now sew this edge a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am back to my zipper foot so I can maintain that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like the previous zipper install, we want to press this really well. If you're using your quilt cotton, go ahead and press it with your iron. If you're using any other materials, you're just going to have to finger press it really well. And just like before, this one wants to roll much shorter, so you have to line up those edges, because this is another situation where it is very important all of the edges line up. You don't want this falling short. Okay, I'm going to top stitch. We're going to repeat the same process with the opposite zipper panel. Lay the right side face down with the zipper face up. Flip the panel over and add the lining. Sew your 1/4 inch seam allowance, press it open, top stitch. I'm done sewing the zipper panel, and you will see that it is much wider than our gusset, and we need it the same width. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim equal amounts from the top and the bottom, and then we're gonna trim down this panel to exactly 14 inches. I don't know about you, but when I assemble things like this, even though I have the best intention of getting everything perfectly aligned, sometimes I'm short, sometimes I'm long, and I didn't want it cut perfectly and already set you up to fail with the gusset step. So that's why this is oversized and why it's extra long, so that we can trim it down so it is a perfect measurement of what we need it to be. So I'm going to keep the pole off right now, trim off these sides, then I'll go ahead and add the zipper pull and trim it so it's exactly 14 inches wide. We've trimmed down our zipper panel so it is exact measurements that we need it to be, and now it measures accurately with this piece. So we're going to do one side at a time to connect the bottom gusset to the zipper panel, and we're going to form a loop. I already added some double-sided tape to the back side here because I feel it's easiest to hold things in place. And you're going to take the liner portion and lay it right sides facing along that edge. As you can see, I already drew my seam allowance on this piece, so I can be very, very accurate, because again, with gussets, it's super important that you're accurate with your seam allowance. Take off this piece and lay the exterior portion right side face down along that edge. Now using the 3/8 inch seam allowance, sew through all layers, back stitching well at the beginning and the end. Now we're going to press all layers away. So I'm going to finger press this well, flip it over, and finger press this well, and top stitch on the bottom gusset portion. I want to make sure my liner isn't looping on the underside. Now we're going to repeat with the opposite end. The bottom portion of the gusset is shorter than the zipper panel, so you're going to get a weird pulling, but you want to line up right sides together, press into that adhesive, and flip it over. And now this is where it's hard to get over there because of the difference in sizes, but you're just going to pull it to this edge, right sides facing, just like that. So 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press it open and top stitch on the bottom gusset, just like we did on the other side. All right, so I've pulled the liner away and the exterior away, and now I'm going to sew top stitch on that. A little awkward on this side because now you got the loop in your way. There you go, one continuous loop. Now we need to add our 4 side landmarks. So what we're going to do is line up these side seams together, just like this, and find the center on each side and mark them. I like to do little snips into this piece. Line up those seams, snip. Do it along the opposite loop here. Now we want to line up those center markings, just like that, and mark the side loops over here. And there we go. You should have 4 landmarks on your gusset now. That's important. Before we attach our gusset to the front and back body panels, we need to add our binding strip. So if you're going to do it the method I'm suggesting, and I find the easiest way, you're going to want to grab those strips right now. If you're going to use fold over elastic or pre-made bias tape, you'll still want to add that now. But fold over elastic's the only thing that you would use in a later step. So if you're going to do it like I say to do it, you're going to use these binding strips. So I am turning my loop so the liner side is out, and this is the top of our panel. The zipper panel is the top. So I'm going to go ahead and fold one of the binding strips 3/8 inch to the wrong side, and I'm going to lay it along the top portion and clip right sides facing along this edge. Now I like to start the beginning and ending seam along the top, so when you look into your bag, you're not seeing that joining seam first thing at the bottom of your bag. It's tucked up under this panel. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch from this edge in the round, attaching the binding strip all the way around. So do your best to smooth the liner and the exterior so there's no ripples, but keeping those edges aligned. I'm using the edge of my foot as my guide. I'm going to ride the edge of the foot along the edge of my materials because that'll be my 1/4 inch. And then I'm just going to freehand the binding strip along that edge as we sew. Make sure your liner stays where it needs to be, so pull it back towards the edge. You don't want it shimmying out of place. Coming up on my zipper pull, so I just want to make sure it's not in my needle path. And we're coming up to the beginning here, and we're going to have at least 1 inch overhang, and I'll go about 1 inch and then trim off any excess. Just past that seam, back stitch. So this itty bitty amount is what I will be trimming off. Now I'm going to repeat with the opposite binding strip along this edge. We're getting to the finish line, guys. Now I have my zipper pull on the left-hand side because, again, I like my zipper pulls to match, and I want it opening left to right. If you're doing it the opposite, you will want to orient your zipper correctly before we move on. So I've got it on the left-hand side, and then this will be the front of our bag. So I'm going to clip that and then turn it wrong side out. So now this is where the front is going to be. So my zipper pull's on the right. It helps you stay oriented. So I'm going to set the back aside from now. We're going to work on the front. So you're going to lay it right sides facing. So this top marking here is going to go where that clip is along the top here. And I'm using the stapler for this because, again, I found in all the prototypes I've made, this really helps keep everything in place and from shifting. So you're going to staple it as close to the edge as possible. You don't want it anywhere in your needle path in your seam allowance. So I'm going to find the other landmark along this bottom here and along the bottom there and clip or staple. Now there's a marking right here and our marking right there. Staple. Last landmark, mark there and there. And staple. So now I'm going to go along the straight edge and staple just until I come up to the corner that's starting to round. Okay, so when you flip it over, you should see the gusset pulling in along the corners. That is important. It is a very tight gusset, but I found that if it's any bigger, you run the risk of having pleats as you go around the corner. And by keeping it the way that I have it, where it's really tight, I have not gotten any pleats. So the best way to get this gusset to this corner is to go ahead and cut into your gusset. And you can clip up to that stitch line that we created. The stitch line is at 1/4 inch and our seam allowance is going to be 3/8 inch. So now I'm going to put my hand on the inside here and I push those to spread out into the corner here, just like that. And I'll clip that right there. And then finish easing it in around. So you're going to need these to spread open and fill in the corner. So just make sure you're grabbing all layers and staple so it doesn't move. Just like that. So you're going to repeat with all 4 corners. As I attach the gusset to the front main body here, I prefer to put this portion against my machine and sew in this direction. This will help me make sure I'm not catching any pleats here, and then I can go slow. Now, this is the 1/4 inch tacking stitch, if you will, to add the binding strips. So I need to be at least 1/4 inch or to the left of that line. If I end up on the line or to the right of the line, you will see this stitch on the front of your bag. So if you're struggling maintaining a 3/8 inch seam allowance, you feel like it's too big or you're going to get a pleat up here and you want to back it down to 1/4 inch, just stay to the left of this line. So I usually just pick a long straight edge because it's easiest to get started that way. Making sure I'm dropping my foot down to the left of the stitching line. I do find that this is easiest to work around if I unzip my gusset and stuff. And then once I come around the corner, I'm just gonna push this in and lay it flat as I go past it. And I'm feeling that there's no ridges or ripples or pleats there. If this is quilt cotton, it's just as easy to turn it right side out and take a look. Make sure that you don't have any pleats in your gusset in here, but because I've got vinyl, I'm just going to leave it because I can see pretty well here. I'm just making sure everything looks good. No pleats. And then I'm looking back here. I want to make sure I caught all layers, because if I didn't, that is a concern. So if the corners look nice and rounded, not jaggedy, or my needle didn't jump all over the place, this would be the time to go ahead and fix those. I still have some staples I need to remove there, but now that it looks good, I'm very happy with how it went on. And trim this down to 1/4 inch and even up all this. You can see this is sticking out further, but we want it all smooth and level and everything. And this is pretty bulky, so we want to trim it down so we can sew on our binding strip. Once again, double check you removed all staples if you use them. So now we're going to go ahead and flip it so our liner is face up, and we're going to pull our binding strip up, straight up. So my favorite thing about doing it this method is already one side is perfectly attached, and I don't have to worry about making sure I catch both sides if I'm doing the double fold at the same time. So now I'm going to go ahead and fold this down and then do another double fold over my previous stitching and clip in place. Do the same thing here, fold this down and then do another double fold covering the stitching. I'm going to remove some of this bulk by cutting on an angle here. And when you do this stitching, it's real important that you do it in a color that matches. So if this is white, it's very hard to see my stitching, and that is on purpose. I know for instructional purposes, you probably don't appreciate it, but when you're doing binding, you want it to just look seamless and blended in as best as possible. So if you're doing black stitching while attaching this binding, you're going to see the stitches. It's going to draw the person's eyes to those stitches, and you really don't want that. You really want to just not even think about it. This is definitely that time you want to use a matching thread color. So once you get it all double folded in place, continue around the edge, then we'll stitch it in place. So this is how it looks so far. I'm going to start with a straight edge underneath my machine here. Drop my foot and my needle in. Now this is what I'm talking about with the stiletto for this. So as I'm sewing, I'm going to take the sharp stiletto and I'm going to pierce my fabric and kind of lift and pull. So I'm always covering my stitch line as I sew. So I didn't turn it wrong side out when we just initially attached the gusset, but I do always want to double check before moving on to the back side that I like the way that it looks. There's no pleats and it's so far spot on. So this actually is on the left hand side, so zipper opens left to right, zipper opens left to right, so I'm good with that. So then you can go ahead and turn it back wrong side out. We're going to repeat what we just did with the front. So the back main body, this is right side up. So we don't want to turn it like this and attach it, right? Because our zipper's up top. So we want our wings oriented correctly, right side's facing. So I'm going to take this mark here and staple it along the top here. So just like the front, I went ahead and stapled it and snipped into the corners. Make sure your zipper is open, and we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process. So a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, trim, and sew your binding. It's got wings. So I did turn it right side out because I do want to make sure that it looks good and I can't see my other stitching before I proceed with finishing up the binding. And then we're almost done. We just have to add our D-ring connectors. So don't forget to trim down your seam allowance and then go ahead and pull up the binding strips and do the double fold and clip just like before. I just blasted it with heat, so hopefully this vinyl will turn a lot easier and not fight me as much. This is the moment of truth. Especially while the vinyl is hot, I'm really focusing on pushing the binding up against the gusset so that it stays there before the vinyl really kind of firms up again. Here we go. So cute. Alrighty, my friends, we are on the home stretch. So you're going to take your D-ring connector and thread one of the D-rings on halfway and fold it. And then line up those punched holes so they are on top of each other and slide it over the flat edge of the side wings here. So just wherever you would want it. Then I'm going to take my marking tool and place the marking where my holes will need to be punched. So with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, every time I've done it, I've always landed in between the stitching, punch the holes through those layers. I'm going to repeat with the other one. So thread it through halfway. Make sure your holes are lined up. You can see through them. Lay it on the opposite side. And punch those holes. And lastly, we just add our rivets and set them. And last but not least, we add the strap we already made. Go us. Aren't you glad you made your strap first? How annoying would it be to be done with this and have to make the strap? You guys did it. Great job.